Welcome to the new video of Neurophilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin. The myth of endless availability. We live in a culture that romanticizes self-sacrifice. From our earliest years, we are taught that being a good person means being endlessly available, that love is proven through constant giving, that saying yes, even when it costs us our peace, is the moral high ground. The message is subtle but powerful. Self-denial equals virtue, and refusal equals selfishness. Children learn quickly that approval often depends on compliance. The one who never complains, who shares their toys, who comforts others at their own expense, is rewarded with praise. This conditioning follows us into adulthood, where emotional availability becomes the currency of worth. We become people who can't rest without guilt, who answer calls at midnight, who listen to endless venting even as our own minds collapse. But something happens when a person begins to step out of this invisible system, when they stop participating in constant drama, when they no longer carry the emotions of everyone around them, when they protect their energy instead of distributing it freely. Society doesn't applaud, it recoils. The labels appear instantly: cold, selfish, distant, heartless. Yet what if those judgments are not about cruelty, but about clarity? What if setting boundaries is not emotional detachment, but emotional intelligence? Carl Gustav Jung, the great Swiss psychologist, observed this pattern with extraordinary precision. He described maturity as the process of individuation, the journey of becoming a whole person. Individuation, Jung said, requires differentiation, learning to maintain emotional integrity even within close relationships. It's not about isolation, it's about knowing where you end and where the other begins. This process threatens the collective order because our social fabric is woven from dependency and unspoken emotional contracts. We are told, without ever being told, that to belong we must comply. Families, friendships, workplaces all run on this silent expectation. Be there for everyone, always. The moment you stop, you break the invisible agreement. It's not that you have become cold, it's that your tolerance for imbalance has run out. For years, what looked like kindness might have been fear of rejection. What seemed like generosity might have been an attempt to earn love. And what others called loyalty could have been avoidance of conflict. We confuse approval with affection, and in that confusion we lose our sense of self. When a person begins to heal this pattern, when they start saying no, the people who once benefited from their endless availability feel something close to withdrawal. Suddenly, the energy they relied on disappears. They must face emotions they once outsourced. The friend who always listened must now listen to themselves. The sibling who always fixed things no longer intervenes. The partner who always absorbed the tension now steps away. The reaction is often anger, disappointment, or moral accusation. You've changed, you're cold, you don't care anymore. But, in truth, something far more radical has occurred. A person has begun to exist on their own terms. Jung would call this a sacred act of psychological rebellion, the moment when the individual separates from the collective conditioning that equates love with self-erasure. It's the first real step toward what he called the self, the deeper, authentic center of our being. But this transformation doesn't come without pain. For someone used to overgiving, boundaries can feel cruel at first. There's guilt, doubt, even fear of abandonment. After all, we have spent years equating connection with compliance. When we stop saying yes to everything, the silence that follows can feel terrifying. But that silence is not emptiness, it's space. Space where authenticity can breathe. Boundaries are not rejection, they are recognition. They say, I know my limits, and I respect them. They say, I will not trade my peace to maintain your comfort. And they say, Most importantly, my empathy has room for me too. The truth is, most people are not used to emotionally healthy individuals. They are used to people who absorb their pain without question, who overextend, who call it love, to destroy themselves slowly. So when someone begins to act from self-respect rather than guilt, it feels like coldness, but it's actually warmth turned inward for the first time. This reorientation marks the beginning of real maturity, the birth of balance. Because to be truly kind, one must first be whole. To be truly giving, one must first have something left to give. And perhaps this is what Jung meant when he said that growing up inevitably means losing the acceptance of some. The cost of authenticity is misunderstanding, but the reward is freedom, the kind that cannot be granted by anyone else because it is born from the courage to belong to yourself. That is the conditioning revolution behind every boundary. Modern society may appear advanced, selfishness beneath its surface, the reclaiming of one's inheritance, soul, a moral script that praises exhaustion as virtue. We are taught to prove our worth by enduring more than we should, to measure goodness by how much of ourselves we can give away. The phrase good person has quietly become synonymous with self-erasure. From childhood, this conditioning begins in small, almost invisible gestures. A child who suppresses their anger to keep peace is called mature. The one who shares their last bit of food, even when hungry, is called kind. The girl who never complains, who forgives and adjusts, is told she will make everyone proud. And so we learn that love is earned through self-abandonment, that to be accepted, we must make others comfortable, even when it hurts. By adulthood, this pattern has become second nature. The friend who never says no, the colleague who works late just to help, the partner who tolerates what breaks them. These are society's quiet saints. Movies glorify them, songs praise their devotion, religions canonize their sacrifice. We learn to see suffering as nobility and silence as grace. To say no feels like sin because we have confused moral goodness with permanent availability. But this is not love, it is conditioning. It is an invisible emotional economy where worth is traded for approval. People who give endlessly are loved for their usefulness, not their essence. And when such a person finally hesitates, even for a moment, the world notices. The same people who once praised their warmth now whisper, "You've changed." Carl Gustav Jung called this dynamic emotional fusion, a psychic blending where one person's feelings merge with another's so completely that individuality disappears. In this fused state, the moment one person begins to differentiate, the other feels abandoned. The caretaker sets a boundary, and the dependent one panics. Where did my source of comfort go? What we call betrayal is often just the beginning of individuation, the natural process of separation that allows two souls to exist without consuming each other. This fusion doesn't just appear in relationships, it is built into our culture. Every form of media teaches that unconditional love means unconditional access. The perfect friend is always there. The ideal mother never rests. The loyal partner forgives endlessly. The devoted employee sacrifices weekends. And beneath these archetypes hides a collective fear that without constant giving, we will lose love itself. In such a world, setting boundaries becomes rebellion. It challenges the myth that love must hurt to be real. It questions the unspoken rule that emotional endurance equals moral worth. When someone finally says, "I can't do this anymore," they are not destroying harmony. They are revealing how false that harmony has been. The paradox is cruel. The more a person gives, the more they are admired, until they stop. The moment they protect their time or peace, admiration turns to accusation. They are suddenly cold, distant, selfish. Yet Jung saw this backlash as proof of progress. He believed that the act of separation, however painful, is necessary for psychological growth, because only when the individual stands apart from the collective can they see who they truly are. Boundaries, then, are not rejection, but revelation. They expose which relationships are sustained by love and which survive only through convenience. When you stop rescuing everyone, the ones who valued your soul will remain. The ones who valued your service will leave. It is a painful but clarifying filtration. Still, this awakening is not easy. It feels unnatural to prioritize oneself after years of conditioning. Guilt floods in, a quiet voice whispering, "You're being selfish." But guilt is not proof of wrongdoing. It is evidence of old programming dying. You are unlearning the reflex to disappear. To step into this new consciousness is to reclaim authorship of your emotional life. It is to understand that empathy without boundaries becomes self-betrayal, that love without self-respect becomes dependency. Jung's individuation invites us to trade the illusion of harmony for the truth of wholeness, to risk being misunderstood in order to be real. So when the world calls you selfish for protecting your energy, remember this: they are not seeing you clearly. They are seeing the space where their control used to be. And though that space may echo with judgment at first, in time it will fill with peace. The quiet peace that comes from finally belonging not to others, but to yourself. The mirror of reactions. When you begin to set boundaries, the first tremor doesn't come from within, it comes from outside. It begins with the silence after a no, the pause after you don't respond right away, the frown when you decline to fix someone else's chaos. Suddenly the people who once praised your kindness seem uneasy. You've changed, they say. You're not as understanding as before. What they really mean is you've stopped being convenient. The moment you reclaim your time, energy, and emotional space, masks start to fall. You begin to see what your generosity had been hiding, the quiet dependencies that thrived in the shadows of your compliance. Some people weren't connected to you out of love, but out of habit. Some didn't need your presence, they needed your participation in their dysfunction. And when you withdraw, the balance shifts. This is the mirror moment. Carl Gustav Jung understood this reaction deeply. He saw it as an inevitable stage in individuation, the painful phase when the individual steps out of the collective roles assigned to them. Every person, Jung said, carries unconscious expectations projected by others: the helper, the listener, the fixer, the peacekeeper. These roles feel like identity, but they are costumes stitched by dependency. When you remove the costume, others panic, not because they have lost you, but because they've lost the version of you that existed for their comfort. In this rupture, you begin to see which bonds were real and which were conditional. The friend who only called to vent goes silent. The sibling who relied on you to mediate family drama now labels you selfish. The partner who counted on your tolerance must now confront their own immaturity. None of this means you have wronged them. It means you've stopped carrying what was never yours. Jung described this withdrawal as retrieving your shadow from others. In psychological terms, it's the moment you stop holding emotions that belong to someone else, their anger, their fear, their chaos. You stop being a container for what they refuse to face. And this, paradoxically, can feel like betrayal to them. Because when people have spent years outsourcing their emotional labor to you, your boundaries feel like abandonment. But in truth, it is a sacred act of honesty. You are no longer pretending that love means suffering. You are refusing to play a role in a play that drains everyone in the end. You are choosing clarity over comfort, authenticity over approval. Still, this shift comes with heartbreak, because some relationships won't survive it. You will lose people, not because you failed them, but because you stopped performing for them. Many of these connections were held together not by mutual understanding, but by repetition. Once the pattern breaks, the illusion collapses. And here lies the paradox Jung warned about. Growth will always look like betrayal to those who depended on your smallness. They will accuse you of being cold because your clarity exposes their confusion. They will call you distant because your independence makes them confront their dependency. But those accusations are not truths, they are projections. The psyche's way of preserving its illusions. You are not being punished, you are being revealed. Boundaries, at their core, are mirrors. They reflect reality, sometimes painfully, sometimes beautifully, but always truthfully. When you start living from self-awareness, you stop cushioning others from the consequences of their own emotions. That exposure forces them to look inward. Some will grow from it. Others will retreat. Either way, the integrity of the relationship changes forever. It is at this point that many people hesitate. The guilt of transformation feels heavy. You may long to go back, to smooth the tension, to apologize for evolving. But that longing is just nostalgia for your old survival strategy, the one where love was maintained through silence. True connection does not fear boundaries, it's strengthened by them. Real friends will celebrate your self-respect because it invites honesty instead of dependency. But relationships built on emotional fusion will crumble, and that collapse is necessary. As Jung said, there is no birth of consciousness without pain. So when others accuse you of being cold, remember they are not describing who you are. They are describing how your evolution feels to those still asleep in their patterns. Your boundaries are not walls, they are windows. They let in light. And light will always disturb the ones who have grown used to living in the dark. In that disturbance, truth begins its work. Truth begins. The difference between coldness and clarity. There comes a moment in every person's journey towards self-awareness when they are forced to ask, am I protecting my peace, or have I become numb? It is one of the hardest questions to face, especially after being labeled as cold by those who once depended on your openness. And yet this distinction between true coldness and emotional clarity is what separates the wounded heart from the mature one. At first glance, both may look the same. Both step back, both become quieter, both stop reacting to chaos, but their motives are worlds apart. A cold person withdraws out of fear. They have been hurt so deeply that distance becomes armor. Their silence is not serenity, it's self-defense. They close off not because they understand their emotions, but because they can no longer bear to feel them. Coldness is the freezing of the soul. It builds walls so thick that even warmth feels dangerous. Love becomes a battlefield to be avoided, and affection a risk too costly to take. The cold person believes that protection lies in isolation. They suppress vulnerability, confuse detachment for peace, and often live surrounded by people yet untouched by them. Their calm is brittle, it cracks under the weight of intimacy. Emotional maturity, on the other hand, is the opposite. It is not a rejection of feeling, but a refinement of it. The emotionally mature person does not avoid connection, they choose it consciously. They understand that not every hand reaching toward them deserves to be held, that empathy without limits becomes self-destruction, and that genuine compassion must include oneself. Boundaries for them are not walls, they are doors with locks, meant not to shut everyone out, but to ensure that only those who bring respect and reciprocity can come in. A mature person does not fear closeness, they simply refuse to confuse chaos with love. Jung understood this difference profoundly. He believed that true psychological growth required differentiation, the ability to be with others without losing oneself in them. Love, in its highest form, is not fusion, It is harmony between two independent souls. It is not the extinguishing of individuality, but its celebration. When a person reaches this state, something shifts in the way they relate. They no longer react impulsively to guilt, drama, or manipulation. They listen without absorbing, support without rescuing, and empathize without dissolving. They do not shrink from another's pain, but neither do they drown in it. And this new posture can be unsettling for those who have never known healthy boundaries. To someone still trapped in emotional dependency, maturity looks like detachment. To someone addicted to constant reassurance, peace looks like indifference. And so the mature person is misread as cold, when in truth, they are simply no longer willing to perform emotional servitude. It takes courage to stay centered when others call your calmness cruelty. It takes strength to remain kind without becoming available to every demand. Emotional maturity means recognizing that being everyone's comfort comes at the cost of your own stability. It means learning that saying no is not the end of love, it's the beginning of honesty. To stand firm in this clarity is not easy. It will cost you people who once adored you. It will bring criticism disguised as concern, but it will also bring peace, the deep, quiet peace that comes from living in truth. Because once you stop offering yourself as an emotional resource for others to consume, your energy transforms. You begin to attract relationships built not on need, but on mutual growth. The emotionally mature person doesn't chase harmony, they embody it. They no longer live reacting to chaos, nor do they sacrifice themselves to fix it. They understand that clarity is an act of compassion. It doesn't reject others, it invites them to meet you at a higher level of awareness. And here lies the paradox Jung so often described. When you finally learn to hold your boundaries with grace, the world interprets it as distance. But that distance is sacred. It's the space where respect is born. Saying no to manipulation is not coldness. Declining to participate in emotional theater is not cruelty. Refusing to carry someone else's pain is not selfishness. It is the quiet declaration, I see myself now and I will not vanish again. True clarity is not about detachment, it is about devotion to truth, to peace, to wholeness. And when that devotion takes root, it changes everything, because emotional maturity is not the death of love, it's its evolution, the courage to become whole. The moment you set your first boundary, you feel it, a subtle shift deep inside, equal parts fear and relief. Fear because you've stepped out of the pattern that once guaranteed acceptance. Relief because for the first time you are breathing air that belongs entirely to you. This is the beginning of becoming whole, and it takes courage, more than the world often acknowledges, to live in such truth. Carl Gustav Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are beneath the layers of conditioning. He believed that human beings are born divided between the person they are and the person they are told to be. Society rewards the mask, obedient, generous, agreeable, but wholeness demands the removal of that mask even when it costs us belonging. Individuation, Jung said, is not about perfection, it is about integration. It's when your yes and your no come from the same honest center. But this path isn't peaceful at first, it's purifying. The moment you stop existing as an emotional extension of others, you trigger a chain reaction. Relationships built on convenience tremble. Those accustomed to your endless giving confront their own emptiness. Dynamics that once felt normal suddenly feel fragile. It is tempting to mistake this collapse for failure, but in truth, it is the clearing before rebirth. Boundaries act like spiritual earthquakes. They shake what isn't solid. They dismantle illusions and reveal which bonds were built on guilt, dependency, or fear. What falls apart was never balanced. What remains is real. Jung wrote that transformation often begins with disintegration, because only through the death of false identity can the true self emerge. And so as you step into this new alignment, you begin to feel something profound: peace without permission. You no longer chase validation. You stop explaining your every decision. You no longer measure your goodness by how exhausted you are. Instead, you measure it by how authentic you've become. This is where many people falter. They long for the familiar comfort of compliance. They miss being liked. They confuse stillness for loneliness. But silence after chaos isn't loneliness, it's healing. When you are no longer surrounded by noise demanding your energy, you can finally hear your own voice again. In this stillness, a quiet truth emerges. You were never meant to be everything for everyone. You were meant to be yourself, fully, unapologetically, and courageously. To live that truth is an act of rebellion in a world that profits from your exhaustion. Wholeness requires a different kind of love, one rooted in awareness rather than obligation. To love maturely is to see others as complete beings, not as projects to fix or sources to fill your emptiness. It is to say, I will walk with you, but I will not walk instead of you. That kind of love can only exist between people who know where they end and where the other begins. Boundaries make this love possible. They are not barriers to connection, they are bridges of clarity. They let people meet you where respect resides. They filter relationships until only those capable of true reciprocity remain. Yet, even as you build these bridges, courage is required, because you will lose those who depended on your silence. You will be misunderstood by those who equate peace with passivity. You will be judged by those who cannot yet see that self-respect is not arrogance but alignment. Still, keep going. The pain of being misunderstood fades. The peace of being authentic endures. The world will tell you that choosing yourself means closing your heart, but the truth is the opposite. Only those who know how to stand alone can truly love freely. Only those who have met their own depths can meet others without fear. When Jung spoke of wholeness, he wasn't describing some distant enlightenment. He was describing this moment, the quiet bravery of saying no when everyone expects yes, the serenity of walking away from noise, the sacred act of belonging to yourself, even when no one claps for it. And as you step further into your integrity, something miraculous happens. The people who are meant for you begin to appear. They don't demand your energy, they honor it. They don't fear your silence, they rest in it. They don't punish your no, they respect it. These are the relationships born not from need, but from mutual wholeness. So if you are walking this path, if you are losing people, redefining love, and sitting in uncomfortable peace, remember, you are not becoming cold. You are becoming complete. This is not the end of your story. It's the return to yourself.